The International Panel on Climate Change has concluded that we have a rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future on this planet. And while we have the scientific and technological knowledge to ensure a livable planet, we are missing the social and political will to address climate change at the scale and with the urgency required. This is where climate communication and education, or CCE, comes in. Effective climate communication and education catalyses social understanding and will for political change, setting action in motion at local and global scales. But what makes CCE effective? Common approaches to climate change education assume that providing more information on the science will lead to action. But this has been shown to not always be effective and can contribute to high levels of anxiety, hopelessness, or denial, rather than meaningful change. The Monitoring and Evaluating Climate Communication and Education project set out to better understand what makes CCE effective in mobilising action across the globe. And through dozens of case studies, we have learnt that while there is no one-size-fits-all approach to CCE, there are often shared qualities. Common to these shared qualities is a focus on relationships with the places we are in and how they are being affected by climate change. Relationships among people in and across communities, and relationships with the stories we tell about the past and our possible futures. The case studies show the importance of connecting climate communication and education to the places where people live, both in understanding the local impacts of climate change and getting involved in taking action to address climate change impacts. A whole school approach to climate communication and education is the focus for the building of a new Earthship school in Chiquita, Argentina. With a biosphere reserve designated lagoon at the heart of the area, the students, families and wider community build an off-the-grid, sustainable school out of recycled materials. Students participate in real-world, project-based learning through engagement with the sustainable school building and the surrounding lagoon. A case study about the Denesoltin Yati Edacheku camp highlights Indigenous land-based learning with youth in the Canadian North. The camp takes place within the Thait Denenene Indigenous Protected Area, the homeland of the Kutselkedene First Nation. The camp integrates storytelling by elders, Dene games, and language learning with harvesting, navigation, survival skills, and environmental monitoring, led by Nihatni Dene Guardians. Camp participants develop a deep understanding of climate change impacts, participate in stewardship of the land, and connect across generations to sustain and build cultural identity and knowledge. A case study of farmers in two communities with different climate impacts in the Eastern Highlands province of Papua New Guinea identifies that sometimes climate communication needs to be hyperlocal. It also identifies instances of traditional knowledge adapting to new climate realities. For example, farmers noticed the timing for planting crops no longer aligned with their prior knowledge of the land, and that shifts were needed. This case underscores the need to adopt local language dialects and alternative communication media, such as video, in working with communities without print-based literacy in developing climate communication and training strategies. Connecting climate change to the existing values and priorities of communities is a central quality of effective climate communication and education. In the rural community of Kulia in northern Ghana, women's involvement in dry season gardening highlights the role of peer-to-peer learning, learning from elders, and how climate change learning and adaptation can lead to shifts in gender roles in the community. With droughts and shorter rainy seasons impacting rural livelihoods, men are migrating in search of jobs. Women are adapting by teaching each other dry season gardening to provide food, and therefore gaining more economic independence for themselves and their families. At Madrasah Tsanawiyah, located on steep forest slopes in Gunaglura village, Indonesia, junior high students are taking part in CCE that is tailored to their community's needs and values, including integrating religious and spiritual teachings. Classes with experiential learning on agroforestry, biodiversity and climate change are held in the forest in the mornings to allow children to work in the fields half the day, which is helping reduce school dropout rates. The CCE at Madrasa also incorporates Indigenous knowledge, such as students learning how their ancestors cared for the environment through Javanese wayang, a traditional form of storytelling through puppets made from plant materials. A case study based on the communities of Trail and Cranbrook in British Columbia, Canada, focuses on the role of politics and local economies in how communities approach climate change. The non-profit Neighbours United uses door knocking as an education strategy to engage people in rural industry-based towns in conversations about climate and energy. This deep canvassing can increase support for climate action by having vulnerable and non-judgmental conversations to shift understandings of how action aligns with existing values. The stories we tell about our places, communities, and climate change are central to making it matter in relation to the things we already value, so that we feel the need for action. One case study focuses on the climate narratives of girls in the Western Cape townships in South Africa, most of whom participate in the program Black Girls Rising. The girls are co-researchers in creating effective climate communication. Together, they identify and answer their big questions on climate change, such as: climate change impacts rich people differently. How does climate change impact people living in low-income communities? In doing so, they learn the importance of shifting narratives away from those of the global north in how climate change is discussed. They also explore the justice impacts of the digital divide, where communities have different access to digital information on climate change, and the importance of intergenerational engagement and youth voice, where young people learn from elders, but also find it necessary and difficult to challenge adult views on climate change. The girls propose that stories through song, poetry, performance and animation are ideal for understanding and inspiring action on climate change.
What they say if you listen, cause that sound of the river moved across the stones.
A radio station in Bundelkhand, one of the poorest regions in India, is harnessing the power of story by integrating local experiences and perspectives. In this case study, Development Alternatives explored how using participatory programming and entertainment media can further climate change knowledge. Abstract climate change concepts are translated into more easily understandable messages that use local language and region-specific cultural norms. The radio station also makes an effort to ensure programming represents the voices of socially and economically marginalised communities and women. In 200 secondary schools across the United Kingdom, SOS UK's Teach the Teacher is helping students engage their teachers in learning and seeing the need for climate education for all. Peer-to-peer onboarding provides the students with the skills to deliver a professional development workshop for their own teachers in their own school. Teachers deepen their understanding of climate education across all subjects and are better able to engage with climate anxiety. Students develop their confidence, presentation and oracy skills, and leadership capacity. The case study uses digital storytelling to share students' reflections through films they have produced themselves. Relationships with places, communities, stories. These are key elements of effective CCE. Despite these commonalities, these elements are engaged in diverse ways across audiences, sectors, and regions around the world. Policy action is critically important for advancing CCE across institutions, systems, and societies, and by providing the leadership already being taken by Indigenous communities, youth, and women with a more central role. Thank you to these and other case studies for the inspiration they provide in helping us understand what CCE in all its forms can be and do in a diversity of places and communities. We hope they also help you imagine possibilities to advance climate literacy and action where you are.